Who are we? What are we? What really matters? A lot of people, especially people that take their faith seriously, are feeling that very thing.
When it comes to our list of evangelical practices, could it be time to downsize? Let's talk about it with Michelle Van Loon on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
Hey, we're so glad you're here. We understand the gift that you give us by devoting an hour of your time to this program. You should understand the gift we give to you by doing this program. At any rate, it's good to have you. You always have a place at our table. In case you're wondering, I'm Steve, the aforementioned old white guy. Matthew Porter, our executive producer, isn't here. By the way, I wasn't here last week, and that program, I don't have much job security here. I'm not going to let him do that more often. Anyway, Matthew Porter is not here. He asked me to tell you it's because he's running a marathon. And if you believe that, you'll believe anything. He's our executive producer. Our producer, Jeremy, is in the little glass booth. Jeremy, you just finished a big exercise thing, right?
That is true. I did.
You want to tell us about it?
I worked out for 75 days straight and
Good.
watched what I ate, and it was a lot of
That's proud of you. I walked around the block 10 times this morning, and then I put the block back under the bed and went to sleep. Our one-man IT department, John Myers, is in the tech bunker. John says if you buy the new iPhone 17 today, you can probably pay it off by the time the iPhone 23 arrives. Dr. George Bingham is the president of Key Life, with his mind on the money and the money on his mind. Jeremy, that sounds like a rap thing, you think? And Kathy Wyatt is the soft, feminine side of the program. Kathy says next week is International Skeptics Day. Yeah, sure it is.
We'll see if that happens.
We have a great guest, and we've been talking to her off the air, and we decided we like her a lot. And her book is really thought-provoking. Michelle is an award-winning author and speaker. She received a graduate certificate from Northern Seminary, served for 8 years as the U.S. Administrator for the Caspary Center of Biblical and Jewish Studies. Her latest book, which I hold in my nicotine-stained fingers, is titled Downsizing, Letting Go of Evangelicalism's Non-Essentials. Michelle, thank you for being with us. We just found out
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we just found out you live in Florida, so this should be a very, since we do too, spiritual, deeply moving, and important broadcast. Michelle, I feel like I got to kind of at the beginning say I've been there too and have done that too. Mm-hmm. I was there when the evangelical movement started with Harold John Ockenga and Billy Graham and a number of others. I served on the Christianity Today board for 20-something years, on the executive committee all of those times. I've had my fingers in a pile of evangelical churches. I have a graduate degree from Boston University, and at one time, and you were Jewish, I was wacko, left-wing liberal, and so the whole movement happened to me and made a big difference, for which I am quite grateful. As we go down and talk about those areas that we maybe should discard, you and I may disagree about which ones should be discarded and which ones, but we can still be friends. If you can deal with the fact that I'm right and you're wrong. Hey, listen.
Absolutely.
I can too. I just want you to know that. Now, tell us, people need to know your story. I absolutely would give a right hand to be Jewish and to know Messiah. I know the problems that come along with that. I know the pain you faced. I know the difficulties with that, but still, I absolutely would give anything to be Jewish if I didn't have to give up Jesus. So tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, as the kids say, hashtag it's complicated. It's been complicated. And just saying that tells you I've lived some life. Both my parents were Jewish in a kind of a Jerry Seinfeld adjacent kind of way. So culturally Jewish with some religious practice. And I was always that really spiritually hungry, curious kid. So it was not necessarily a good match because I was definitely asking for different kinds of information than I think my family or my cultural and faith community were able to provide. But I came of age at the time that the Jesus movement was roaring through the country in the late 60s and early 70s. And I had a friend at school who came one day. This was one of my weed smoking buddies. She came one day and told me that she had become a Christian the night before. And I looked around the cafeteria, which was almost entirely full of Gentiles. And I said, "But you're all Christians." And she said, "No, it doesn't work that way." She tried to explain. She might as well have been speaking Esperanto to me. But that conversation was the beginning of a place for my questions to kind of focus and aim myself. And the first time I read the Gospel of John, which was many months later, it was a revolution to me in a time where revolution was in the air. And when I read Jesus's words that he was the way, the truth, and the life, and the way to come to the Father, that was like a light switch that went beyond actually even what I understood, but that was the beginning. And now here I am all these years later. Now, at the time, my parents told me I wasn't allowed to attend church or whatever. They hoped to starve it out, but I had really good sneaking skills. So I continued to sneak to Bible studies and listen to Christian radio, listen to sermons, hated the music, turn on metal the minute that the hymns came on. And that was the beginning of the journey that has taken me to this very day.
You know, as I read your book, I'm a cynical old preacher. I really am. And while you and I might disagree, one of the areas that I think we're different is that you have a far higher expectation of human nature than I do.
Oh, I don't know about that, but
I mean, there wasn't a thing in your book that surprised me, and I could have added considerable pages to your book.
bet you could.
You know, the difference is you're shocked, and I yawn because I want to say, but of course. The heart is deceitful above all things. It's desperately corrupt. Who can understand it? So you have to cut some slack for this cynical old preacher as we talk. Let's well, we're running out of time in this segment. This is going to be such a great hour, and we are so appreciative of you being a part of it. The book, by the way, and you got to get it. You got to read it. If you're a liberal, forget it. But if you're an evangelical, this is your book. Downsizing, letting go of evangelicalism's non-essentials. This book will make you think, and it ought to be a discussion, small group study in evangelical churches. Of course, if you try to start that, they're going to kick you out. But do it anyway for Jesus, and then you can become an Episcopalian. Guys, we're out of here, but we're going to come back just like Jesus, so don't go anywhere. Hey, thanks for joining us. We're talking with a lady we like a lot, author and speaker Michelle Van Loon. Her new book is titled Downsizing, Letting Go of Evangelicalism's Non-Essentials. I suspect a good move would be to define what evangelical means. I served all those years on the Christianity Today board, and nobody on the board could define it. You know, we got good news. That's a part of the name itself, but it doesn't define what evangelicalism is. For me, it was simply biblical, Christian, apostolic orthodoxy. And it's always been that for me. When I came out of my wacko liberal stage, I found an anchor. And it didn't mean that everybody I knew lived it well, but I knew it was true, and I still believe that it's all true. But maybe we ought to back up and you define what you mean when you say evangelical.
Well, the kind of the reflexive definition that a lot of people point to is called Bebbington's quadrilateral, which actually sounds like a card game, but I digress. But he claimed, and I'm just looking in the book so that I say it all right, that it includes conversionism, being born again, usually through a crisis, activism, that you're out there preaching the gospel and being very involved also in social reform efforts. We could have a whole conversation about what that has come to mean. Biblicism, Bible as authority, and crucicentrism, focusing on the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. It doesn't always fit because evangelicalism has come to mean everything from cultural and political belonging to one person that I quoted in the book called it a faith of passionate piety. And actually, functionally, when it comes to spiritual evangelicalism. I'm not talking about the political, although it definitely spills over. Passionate piety actually kind of fits the profile pretty well.
Yeah.
So,
I can think of a lot of people who fit what you just described. I can think of a lot of evangelicals who don't.
mhm,
So it's a complicated, messy kind of thing when you start putting it together. I'm a right wing. I thought Rush Limbaugh was a communist, so I'm way to the right, and yet that's not my faith. I didn't
right.
get that from Jesus. I got it because I'm smart and wise and right. But I know those evangelicals who are sure they got it from Jesus, and others
Mhm.
who are sure they didn't.
Yep.
But I appreciate what you just said. All right, tell us the first thing you'd get rid of. Phyllis Tickle made a good point, by the way.
She did. She did kind of a long view of church history and observed that about every 500 years, the church goes through a major shift. And you can go through history. The last one that we can all point to is Reformation, and that was about 500 years ago. So we are right on cue for some other changes. Now, evangelicalism is a subset of Protestantism, which is only part of what the church worldwide is, but it's dominant, particularly in our world, in America and in the West.
Mm.
It's a dominant, loud, um, demanding, insistent kind of voice that has insinuated itself into all manner of things, beyond getting people um, out of hell and into heaven,
Um,
as some would say. So,
I'm going to struggle with this one. For those of us that are over 70,
mhm,
in that, being in that vintage, growing up in an evangelical church, as
mhm,
the years went by, you saw the drastic changes in what I guess we could refer to as the mainline churches that obviously were not evangelical, but even more than not evangelical. I mean, so many of the things that we would consider to be the quote verities of the faith unquote began to go by the wayside significantly. And so here I am at my age, and I struggle with losing the word evangelical because of what I associate with it, that being the fact that scripture is, that the Bible is the word of God, that Jesus is the only way, et cetera, and so forth. All of those things which were identified with evangelicalism. And yet in the last year and a half, I have changed denominations church-wise, and even within that little bit of a shift, I have seen some, what I would say in the past would have been very dramatic things for me to find any way to adhere to. That was a terrible statement, but where I sometimes don't know where to go and what I can approve of, and I'm not giving you much time. We may have to pick up with this after the break, but you know where I'm going with this.
I do know where you're going, and big empathy here, because I think a lot of people, especially people that take their faith seriously, are feeling that very thing. Who are we? What are we? What really matters? We've devoted a lot of energy to building lots of Christian industries and ministries and institutions and creating culture that isn't necessarily connected to the core of what it is to believe.
Yes.
Yeah, it's good
Yes.
stuff. Let's pursue that on the other side of the break. I'll have Kathy, the fanatical Lutheran she's become.
I did not mention that. You
Yeah.
were the one that mentioned it.
Well, you would have if you'd talked any longer. I feel like I'm not saved anymore, and you have rejected me because
Good
of my
grief.
Reformed and Presbyterian roots. Hey, listen, this is a fun interview, but a very serious one. These are issues we need to discuss, and you need to get the book, Downsizing, Letting Go of Evangelicalism's Non-Essentials. It's important that we find out what is important and what isn't. Hey, you're listening to the Etc. program, and we're hanging out with author and speaker Michelle Van Loon. You can keep up with her and write this down at Michelle Van Loon. That's VANLOON.com. That's a great website. You ought to go there.
Michelle, before the break, we were kind of beginning to delve into the issue of what is it that we need to latch onto as far as evangelicalism is concerned, and what is it that we don't. And for those of us that have been in that framework of evangelicalism for, a lot of years, it's a little bit nerve-wracking to divert from that, but at the same time, realizing that there's just a lot of stuff that really doesn't have anything to do with what God says in the Word, and that's the number one primary thing. So I think what we want to know from you is some of the things that you look at and say, I think we could probably set this one aside or this one aside or whatever.
Mhm. I think it's easier to actually offer a framework to listeners rather than a list.
Okay.
So the framework for me is imagine, and this is not original to me. I wish I could claim for it, but imagine a triangle, and the tip of the triangle is labeled dogma, the stuff you're willing to die for, the unchangeable truths, the things in the creeds, just the reality of a risen Christ, the reality of the incarnation, the reality that God created the world, for example. Underneath that, draw a line about a third of the way down and call that doctrine. And that is what's specific to your church. Infant baptism, baptism by immersion, communion once a month, communion every week. Those kind of women's roles in the church. I know some people think it's dogma because it has to do with the way that you read scripture, but in most cases it's doctrine. And then the rest of that triangle is opinion, dress codes, morality, drinking, not drinking, voting habits, all of those things. So imagine that triangle. And if you can do the sorting to figure out what is absolutely non-negotiable, that's worth dying for, which is not actually a super popular kind of thing to say in our prosperity-oriented kind of culture, but the things that are absolutely worth dying for are the things that are worth fighting for to carry forward to the next generation. A lot of the rest is what we use to divide from one another. We've got the luxury of being able to do that as Protestants, particularly, but also to define ourselves. And all of that opinion has become for a lot of people what functions as dogma.
Oh,
We'll just skip right over the doctrine and go right to dogma. And really, these rummage sales that happen is God kind of cleans house in the church. If you read church history, take heart. That stuff is the stuff that survives. The rest of it, not so much.
that works for me. I like that. My dogma is when somebody tries to take my pipe away. And a number of people have tried that within the church, and I'm still here and they're not. I'm kidding. I really think that's profound. I think what you just described is very helpful. I didn't know we were going to agree on that much.
Uh-oh.
You disappoint me, Michelle.
I know. And I'm cool with your pipe too. So I don't know.
I knew you
Maybe
were.
we're both heretics. I don't know.
Listen, George, you want to phrase a question and then talk about it in the next?
Well, I guess there would, I mean, as you say, there's still the question of what's in the dogma category and what's in the doctrine category and so forth. And
the
maybe,
devil in details.
Yeah, and maybe you could just touch on that a little bit, and especially what are, generally speaking, the risks of trying to, make that distinction. What is that? What kind of conflicts or whatever? And then speaking of dying for, I would appreciate comments on the growth of Christianity in the worldwide church and what they're centering on and how that's growing.
Yeah, that's good. By the way, Michelle, there's been some radical change. The nuns are decreasing, and no, they're not decreasing. They've stopped growing, and the other side is growing. And there is a major movement of young people. We've had guests from Europe who talk about it as well as in America. A lot of young people are heading back to the church. And some of them to liturgical churches and some of them to evangelical churches. And I don't know, well, we can talk about that. We can't keep talking. We got to pay for this, so we're going to take a break. And we're going to leave. And this is hard work, so we're going to have some milk and cookies, and then we're coming back. Hey, thanks for spending time with us. And just to be clear, our free weekly email is on the dogma list. You can try it out today at go to keylife.org/subscribe. And if you don't like it, it's free, so you can't say anything.
Michelle, before the break, and you had given that very helpful sort of model of the dogma and doctrine at the top, and then we started talking about the sort of the risks of, okay, we understand a distinction, the to die for dogma, but how do you choose that in a sense, and then what are the risks that you go through, both on a individual level perhaps and on a sort of institutional level?
That is an excellent question. And the reality is that a lot of it kind of shows up in the way people have been discipled poorly. If you talk to spiritual abuse survivors, if you talk to people who've exited the church because they've been burned or burned out, a lot of times kind of undergirding that is the idea that opinion or doctrine has become as non-negotiable as dogma. And and that level of inflexibility on opinion level things, particularly, um, has done a world of harm. When I get the opportunity to speak with pastors, I tell them the best gift you can give yourself, although it's super uncomfortable and awkward, is to try to be a listener to the people who've left your church, either loudly or those who've kind of slunk away and you haven't seen them for 9 months and, whatever. But they've got a story to tell you about what matters and what doesn't matter in the church. Now, there's all kinds of reasons, people leave churches for lots of reasons, some of which are really great and some of which we may shrug and say, I don't get it. But listening without trying to be a salesperson for the church, trying to woo people back, trying to convince them they're wrong, will actually net, I think, in most cases, some incredible clarity on maybe stuff that shouldn't matter. And a lot of times it has to do with the way power is used in a church. That is almost always, when it rises to the level of doctrine or dogma, the use of power and authority, people get hurt. And it's never generative, life-giving, Jesus-looking behavior. It just isn't.
Michelle, it's an old book. I don't know if you've read it, but it's still profound. It was written by Bill Hendricks, and it was called Exit Interviews.
Yeah, I remember it.
That's a great book. He stood at the back door of the church and asked people why they were leaving and the church growth people said, why are you coming? We'll do more of it. And he said, that's the wrong thing to do. And that's exactly a profound book. And it's exactly what you're advocating here.
Right.
Well,
and that idea may have been planted way back when I read that book. But my husband was an elder of a church once and did this very thing. And it was excruciating.
I bet.
And humbling and super instructional. It also clarified a lot of the practice in the church wasn't healthy and didn't matter and shouldn't have mattered.
Did he survive, your husband?
Yeah, well, we're coming up on our 46th anniversary. So, yeah.
At the next vote for elders, did they vote for him?
No, the church didn't survive.
Okay.
Oh. Well, and
actually.
Yeah. Oh. And again, kind of getting back to the risks aspect. I mean, have you found that, and my bias, I'm in a PCA church, very liturgical and formal, and take the confession seriously, and I'm not exactly sure, at what point pastors would take draw the line on dogma and doctrine on some of the issues, but do you find that in a sort of more structured authority, there's a greater risk of, getting caught up and missing the distinction, or in something where it's sort of a looser, up to the people that started the church and it's independent and so forth? Are there distinctions there that you've seen?
I actually, that's another really good question. And I actually believe it has more to do with the function of what power does to a leader's soul than the structure that the leader is in, whether it's a super tight hierarchy or whether it's, a little startup church that's meeting in a rented gym in an elementary school somewhere.
So sort of checks on the power.
It's the checks on the power
or accountability.
have actually, and I've been in the book details, even though it kind of uses my story, it's also got 200 footnotes in there because I'm a nerd and because I wanted to make sure and give some
Dogmatically?
historical background to all these different movements that we had landed in through for lots of moving around as well as some pretty big trauma.
Michelle,
church trauma.
we're at the end. As I said, we could spend hours talking to you. We just scratched the surface.
Is this segment 4 already?
Yeah.
Jeez.
This is,
I know,
yeah,
right?
it went by fast.
Time flies, you guys.
Michelle, thank you for going where people don't often go. And I suspect you paid a price for that, and I'm glad for you. Thank you for taking time out of a busy schedule. This is a book you really need to get. It doesn't mean you'll agree with everything, and then again, you might. Old Downsizing, letting go of evangelicalism's non-essentials. Michelle Van Loon. And by the way, anybody who gets angry with you is an idiot. You are not exactly a divisive, angry, spitting and cussing person.
I have my moments. We haven't known each other that long, Steve. I have my moments.
Well, this hour has been great. Thank you for doing it with us. Guys, we're going to come back for a little bit and tell you who we're going to do it unto next week. And you are going to be incredibly surprised. I don't know, but we'll see. Well, that was a great and interesting hour. We've been talking about Michelle now that she's gone, and we thought maybe it would be a little bit more adversarial than it wasn't. It was very helpful and very informative. One of the things, and this is just where I come from, that she talks about often in the book is spiritual abuse. And I think we might have some differences about what that is. You know, I am for strong leadership. I really believe that. And I think sometimes we call a strong leader abusive because he or she is a strong leader. And I think you have to be careful when you start defining it that way, because you end up with a leaderless church that's led by committees. And maybe that's not a good thing. You know, it's like Jesus saying to his disciples, you know, I don't know about this. Why don't we vote on it? And I realize that illustration doesn't work very well. But I'm not sure we're supposed to lead by committees all the time. But I also understand the dangers of abuse and manipulation with guilt. And I've seen it all the time. I've seen it in me. And I've repented, and I'm not proud of that. And there are a lot of issues in that book like that, where if we could talk them out and define them more carefully, and there might be a whole lot of agreement. At any rate, get the book. It'll make you think. And we need to think about these issues. I've spent, and Kathy laughs about it and makes jokes about it, and so does George. And I do too. But there are really a lot of things that are not as important as we make them. And maybe there are some things that we don't make very important that are worth dying for. And as you said, the devil's in the details. And so you got to sit down, a la Charlie Kirk. You got to sit down and you got to talk it out. Maybe debate it a little bit. See where you come out. Who's on next week?
I was going to say, did I get a break until the end of the year? Wow. This is going to be very interesting. This gentleman's name is Valentin, and I believe I'm saying it right, Sini. He has written a book. He's from the Ukraine. We're actually going to be talking to him in the Ukraine, and his book is titled Serving God Under Siege, How War Transformed a Ukrainian Community.
Oh, my. That's going to be great. If you miss it, you're going to be really, really sorry. So, we'll be back next week, same time, same place. Do join us. Between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. And that gives you a wide, wide berth.